Welcome. Welcome to the April 13th, 2021 meeting of the Johnson City Regional Planning Commission. If you're here to speak during the public hearing portion of an agenda item, please wait until the public hearing has been opened. Once the public hearing has been opened, one person at a time may come to the podium to be recognized. Please speak clearly into the microphone and begin by giving your name and address. We will now call this meeting to order at 6:04 p.m. All right. So we've called the meeting to order. I'd like to begin with the invocation and pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Vice Chairman Cooper, would you please lead us?
Yes, ma'am. Please join me. Heavenly Father, please bring to this, our deliberation tonight, wisdom, understanding, and a willingness to understand each other. Bless each individual that is here tonight and help us all to make decisions that are in the best interest of our community. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand and face the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Next item is the approval of the agenda for April 13, 2021 meeting of the Johnson City Planning Commission. And before I have a motion to approve, I just want to check because I do notice we have several people present, so I want to do this the most efficient way possible. How many people are here to speak on the rezoning of the Mountain Home neighborhood? 1, 2, okay. Is there anybody here to speak on the Vintec subdivision? All right, the Evelyn Woody Heirs subdivision, and that would be it. Okay, so we have the most people for the first item.
I move we accept the agenda.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Dagenhart, a second by Commissioner Pavlich to accept the agenda as presented. Do we need to vote on that, Nicole?
No, ma'am.
Okay, all right. All right, the next item is the approval of the minutes from the March 9th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. Those have been distributed. Has everybody had a chance to review them? Are there any corrections, additions? Okay, then I'm looking for a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Cooper, a second by Commissioner Dagenhart. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I abstain. I was
Okay.
not
I
present.
do too, since I wasn't here.
Okay. All right, the next item is under old business, and this is rezoning number 1067, the Mountain Home Neighborhood Area rezoning. And we'll let staff begin with their presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioners. Want to go through a brief presentation. This is really an abbreviated synopsis of the information that was provided to you in your packet by iCompass. So hopefully you had an opportunity to review all that information. The other thing I want to note is that you've heard a version of this presentation before, back when this rezoning came before you in December of 2020. It was, at that time, and still is, a staff-initiated rezoning or a city-initiated rezoning. And at the time, it included more parcels than we are including now. So with this revised petition, we are actually condensing or contracting the rezoning, and we'll show you exactly how. So let's first take a look at some photographs that represent the area. These are some shots that were obviously shot over the winter, representative of the variety of the housing stock in the area. These are examples of two small-scale commercial buildings that exist within the neighborhood now. And as it turns out, actually, other than the one on the right, the one on the left is actually embedded in the middle of the block along Lamont, not on one of the corners. So it shows that this concept, this idea of neighborhood scale, which is small scale, neighborhood scale commercial, is not something new to this particular area. So let's go back in time just a little bit, give you a little bit of history on the neighborhood and on the zonings that have applied in the past. Pre-1972, the neighborhood area and those exact outer boundaries could be argued by a number of different folks in a number of different ways, but this is a map from the 2005 downzoning. But pre-1972, it was zoned R3, which is really our low-scale multifamily zone. And then it was upzoned in that same year, 1972, to R4 and R5. And the idea then was, you can see there on the right, was to support small urban lots, to allow for infill to happen on those smaller urban-sized lots. Instead, what happened, and happens often, is that single-family homes, especially those larger ones, like that larger dark blue one you saw on the right there earlier, gets converted into apartments and boarding houses and things like that. What happens then is that the neighborhood pushes back and says, now wait a minute, the upzoning is not working as intended. So we want to push this back, and we want to preserve the single-family nature and the single-family character of our neighborhood. And so that's what happened in 2005. There was a large-scale downzoning back to R2C to restore and protect the single-family character, which also in secondary impacts reduces congestion. You can see there that a similar downzoning had occurred in the Tree Streets in around 1987. So with this particular rezoning, staff, the city, wants to come right out of the gate and indicate that this is not an intent, or there is no intent to impact or change the R2C that was created or downzoned to back in 2005. We recognize and support and want to further that single-family protection on the interior portions of the neighborhood. There is no intent to consider block interiors. Again, the concept here is neighborhood protection. Our focus is on the Watauga corridor, and then also on what we identify as newfound frontage along Founders Park. And I've got some photographs here in later slides that identify that. You can see here on the left, this is an aerial photograph, and this is the zoning area right in here. And so it's bound by, this is Commerce Street, here's the model mill over here on the right. You can see Founders Park, the new multi-use trail that comes up through the neighborhood on Highland, State of Franklin, and then this is West Watauga, and then this is Lamont. So this is the boundary of the rezoning right here. You can see here that the Founders Park was a large-scale stormwater project that also doubles as this beautiful urban park. Now, I realize that the demolition of those former warehousing and manufacturing buildings predate me, so I can only reference photographs and things like that, as well as a lot of stories that I've heard, but understanding that there was significant industrial located here along Brush Creek, which is all now gone, and you have this newfound frontage on public investment. And so the idea from the city's perspective is, how do you allow for infill, appropriate infill, to be able to happen and allow for small-scale goods and services, as well as some additional residential units that now front on this beautiful newfound public investment. Over here on the right from the ground, you'll see this is a shot from the corner of Lamont and Commerce. the photographer standing right about here and shooting down towards Founders and Model Mill. And again, before, that was certainly not the view shed. And then this is looking east down Highland towards, you can see the multi-use trail over here on the right. On the last two bullets there, this concept downzones and corrects also heavy industrial zoning, which you can see down here next to the railroad tracks in Brush Creek. We have several pieces of property, both privately owned as well as city-owned, that have maintained that heavy industrial zoning that we would simply like to correct. It is highly unlikely that heavy industrial would ever develop in property this small, but then the other is I think it would be inappropriate for this area and for this neighborhood, as well as the environmental impacts on Brush Creek. So the old petition back in December, and then it went through first reading at the City Commission in January. It stopped after first reading. Included these parcels you see here on this upper left-hand side of West Watauga, as well as these two parcels here on the corner of Highland and West Watauga. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parcels up here fronting on Lamont and Whitney. So you can see here on the right-hand side, all of those parcels, those 5 parcels up here on the corner have been removed. These 2 parcels here on the corner have been removed. And then these upper parcels, the apartments and the church, have been removed. So the revised revision focuses on 3 different areas. One, the city-owned land. So there are properties that are still city-owned that are simply inappropriately zoned for the land uses on the ground. One is, you can see these in the yellow are currently zoned heavy industrial. That was the former industrial site. Those are now all part of the Founders Park parking lot as well as the multi-use trail. So our proposal is to downzone that to R2, which is consistent with public open space. And then the pool and spa store, this gentleman approached us last October at our neighborhood meeting, and he agreed, or he concurred. He was excited about getting his zoning corrected since he is currently heavy industrial zoning, and was interested in the B3 zoning, which is consistent with other commercial zoning extending just out away from downtown. So number 1, city-owned properties. Number 2, we removed properties that we had not received expressed or explicit approval to include them by the property owner. And that was a question that was asked of the City Commission back in January. On all of those properties, do you have expressed approval from every single one? And we did not. Now, the city has the authority to initiate these types of rezonings, but there was not expressed approval from all, so we've removed those parcels. And then the third is to correct nonconformities, and the nonconformity can be found here with the B3. Obviously, it's heavy industrial, but then also this lot here that has the florist and a variety of other businesses is also currently zoned heavy industrial, and so the idea is to bring the zoning in conformity with the land use. In terms of the comp plan, the current land use you can see is quite varied in the area. But over on the right-hand side, there was a comment made in our staff report to you that this entire area is identified in the future land use map as residential. Now, I mean, it would be irresponsible of us to just ignore that and not point that out. We have an obligation. This is your policy. This is the City Commission's policy that was adopted. However, policy is not law, and that's just it. It is a vision. And at the time, it was envisioned that this entire area would remain or grow to be residential. You can see that.
I'm sorry, what year was that comp plan?
For the land use plan, it was 2007.
Thank you.
And but as you can see on the left, what has developed is kind of a patchwork of different land uses. And so now with the new public investment that has occurred, as well as with Brush Creek lying there and the railroad tracks, we believe that it is highly unlikely that you would continue to get residential development down along State of Franklin, and then especially down here at the intersection of State of Franklin and West Watauga. Now, it can be argued that additional residential units could be provided over here in this newfound frontage of Founders Park, but that's what the MX1 allows. It does allow for residential, but it also allows for that small-scale commercial. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, and the staff recommendation is to approve as revised.
Under the MX1, can you have multiple stories, residential on the, or like a business opportunity on the bottom and residential on top?
You could, yes.
Could you go through the MX1, what is allowable under the MX1, if we can do it in a fairly quickly manner?
Sure. MX1 is, again, the most important part about the MX1 is the intent for it to be small scale or neighborhood scale. In fact, for commercial uses, it caps the building footprint at 2,000 square feet. Now, you can go vertical on that, but you have a cap on the building footprint at 2,000 square feet. An example, so if you're sitting here trying to think of, well, gosh, what does 2,000 square feet look like? Think of a recent rezoning that we had, and that was Local Motion Bike Shop. The Local Motion Bike Shop that sits right there, right next to the Tweetsie Trailhead, is roughly about 1,900 square feet. So that is that scale that the MX1 is looking for. In terms of the allowed uses,
How many stories, though, did you say? How many stories could it be?
I believe it could be a total of 3. I can get that verified when I sit down. I'll be glad to get that verified. But in terms of the allowed uses, they would be generally neighborhood scale goods and services. So it's going to be things like a bakery, a hair salon, a professional office like a lawyer or a doctor or something along those lines, a pharmacy or a dry cleaner. So those kinds of neighborhood scale services that you might want to obtain on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning or after work does not involve your heavy automobile-oriented uses, does not include car lots, oil change facilities, things like that. It's those types of uses that you need just on a daily basis in your neighborhood.
Could be brewery
Could be a brewery, yes.
with music at night.
Sure, sure.
Could Pals?
I'm sorry?
Could it be a Pals?
House.
Pals,
Quick.
like, or?
No, I believe that the restaurant is limited to seated only.
Okay. And what are the
Right.
parking requirements of MX1?
Parking requirements are actually very similar to the parking requirements you would have downtown. You have to account for your parking, but it doesn't necessarily have to be provided on that exact parcel. You can share that parking with adjoining lots, or you could share it with public lots that are in a certain vicinity. But all of that is dependent on the site plan. It's dependent on what's being proposed. But the idea, and this is really typical of a lot of mixed-use zones in other communities, is that parking, you're really wanting to design for the pedestrian, the bicyclist, the guy on the skateboard, as well as the person on or in the car. So you're not focused on your typical minimum parking requirements you would have in a more suburban style setting, like at a grocery store, like the Kroger or Sam's. That is clearly automobile oriented, and you need to have those minimum parking requirements. And so it's intended to be more multi-transportation.
Within the,
Nope, go ahead.
sorry, within the MX1, are there any types of buffer requirements with opposing lots?
It depends on what you're abutting. Depends on the
An R2, for instance, or the house, just a single dwelling house?
I believe it is 10 to 15 feet, but I can verify that as well.
Is there any type of shrubbery or trees?
It would be your standard type A or type B buffers, but I'm happy to
Okay.
pull that up.
What's the worst thing you could put in one of those areas?
That's a subjective question. Everyone's gonna feel differently about different uses. So
What's your worst one?
I don't have a worse one.
Okay.
We worked really long and hard on the list.
Thanks, sir.
Sure. I enjoy those questions.
All right. Are there other questions of staff at this time?
Has there been any follow-up conversation with the property owners that have been eliminated? as far as their interest in being rezoned?
Not at this time. What we have done is we have scaled it back in an attempt to try to address some of the concerns that were both raised before the January City Commission meeting, as well as raised during that meeting. We understand there was an opinion piece posted in the Johnson City Press expressing concerns about gentrification, so all valid, normal concerns, as well as introduction of this zoning, or kind of the domino effect into the center of the neighborhood. And so what we wanted to do was truly pull any and all parcels away from the center of the neighborhood and really focus on either the West Watauga corridor, where someone has expressed interest in being a part of it, or there is a non-conforming situation along State of Franklin where you've got non-conformities or city-owned property. And then you can see that the bulk of the rezoning really now shifts over to the right-hand side, over to the east, to the properties that front Founders Park.
One other question,
Sure.
Preston. The present proposal is consistent with the land use plan, the 2007 plan?
No, it is currently not, because your current land use policy calls for, because you can see the railroad tracks is the line of demarcation. And so the railroad tracks, everything north of that is called for to be strictly residential.
Okay.
Right.
MX1 wouldn't that be a brand new zoning for us and would not have been included in that
Yes.
particular land use?
I'd have to check the history on that. That predates me. I believe it was written after 2007.
I think that's
Right.
right.
Yeah.
I think it was written in 2011. But we've since modified it. We just recently modified it.
Have there been any additional neighborhood meetings or anything between the original proposal and this new proposal?
So our original neighborhood meeting was on Saturday morning, October 24th. We pitched a tent out there in the Founders Park parking lot, had coffee and donuts, and set up zoning boards and all that, and mailed out postcards to residents and property owners alike. Had a fairly decent turnout. It was a rainy day that day, plus we were in the middle of the pandemic. So I believe we had about a half a dozen, maybe up to 10 people walk down or drive there. It was from 9 to 12. Then after that, we entered into the Planning Commission and the City Commission phase. When staff pulled it back, we knew that we needed to at least offer another neighborhood meeting. And so on February 24th, I sent an email to a number of stakeholders in the neighborhood, folks that I'd been in conversation with before, as well as the entire City Commission. And on the 24th of February, identified that we were going to pull this thing back, go back before Planning Commission again, and have another neighborhood meeting. So we mailed out postcards again to all property owners within 200 feet of the rezoning area, which is our standard notice, as well as we went one step above, and we wanted to make sure to grab all of the renters too. And so we mailed postcards that just said occupant of the actual address of all the properties in the area that I noted before: Lamont, Watauga, State of Franklin, Commerce. And that was held on April 6th, so last Tuesday, and I had one individual show up who was asking whether or not they were included in the rezoning. It's a property up here on Lamont Street, and they're not included, and so she was quick to depart. But outside of that one individual, no one else attended.
I know state law requires only a 200 feet within the boundary notification, and I certainly understand that the city can't mail postcards to everybody in town about everything. But approximately how many houses away do you think that covers if you're mailing a postcard?
Those are 50-foot lots, right?
Right, they're
So-
generally 50-foot lots.
So maybe
Four-
four houses in
pieces
each
of property.
direction? Okay.
On the outer side of Lamont, Watauga, it's most likely not going to cross State of Franklin, or if
Right.
it does, it would have notified the model mill owners. And then on the outer side, the city obviously got notified because of Founders Park, and then the gentleman that owns the cemetery. So in terms of neighbors, everyone within that block got one, both property owners and renters. And then again, yes, everyone, and all of those lots are generally about 125 feet deep. They vary. And so it would have extended this way probably to include these two blocks, and then would have extended this way to include, kind of a block or kind of a range like in this right here.
Okay, thank you.
Preston?
Sure.
Did you also post public signs?
Yes, public signs have remained posted all the way back to December. And in fact, I've gone out 3 different times during the winter and ensured that they were still up. Unfortunately, one was stolen in front of the house on the corner of, or just blew away, I don't know, but it wasn't there. But it was on the corner of Highland and Watauga. However, there have been multiple signs placed throughout the vicinity, and I've gone 3 different times to make sure that they are erect and in the ground and that they're there.
Thank you.
Preston, 2 issues have been brought up, that Jamie brought up, that we don't really have answers to, that I think are pretty important, that we need answers to. One is the height of the, and that's very hilly over there. So if you put a 3-story building straight up, you're going to be just overpowering the neighbors, I would think. So if we can find that out, and then the other is just the buffers.
Sure.
If you're going to put a small business in, you've got music, you've got outdoor dining, that kind of thing. We have to do something to protect the neighborhood as well, because it is primarily a residential neighborhood, and all of us need to be thinking about that. So what if a tavern goes in next door to me?
Right.
What do I need to protect myself? So how can we get those answers?
Sure. Actually, Whitney, I believe, has been
Whitney's got
pulling that up
Good.
while.
So,
Come on.
Whitney Hodges, if you need
Hi,
for the
Whitney.
record. The height requirement is 35 feet. So, yeah.
So divided by 12, is that,
Requirement or maximum?
Maximum,
Max.
the maximum is 35 feet. So,
so is that 2
and-
stories or 3 stories? What is it,
Sounds
Mike?
like at least
2
3.
stories?
3.
Two stories and some change?
No, it could be 3.
3.
I'll read the whole thing.
30.
The maximum height shall be 35 feet unless uses are mixed vertically, i.e. ground floor commercial with office or residential in the upper floors, in which case the maximum height can increase to 45 feet.
Ooh.
The buffer yards, it is a medium, and you were asking about what it goes to the residential, and even if it did something different, it's a gradated scale, and it's a buffer yard classification of 1, which would be a buffer width of 15 feet. It's type 10 evergreen trees, or 10 feet with a 6-foot wooden fence or masonry wall, and type 1 evergreen trees.
Okay, so
On
there's
the-
a requirement.
There is a requirement.
So on the, if I can just qualify one thing, on the fence size, was the 6 foot a maximum, minimum? Is there a maximum or minimum to that?
I am going to say that is what it needs to be. It doesn't have maximum
It
or
doesn't,
minimum.
it doesn't give a range, it just says 6 feet, right?
No, it would have to be that number.
It can't be anything more or less than 6 feet.
It could be more. It's highly unlikely to get a privacy fence over 6 feet
Okay,
because of stability and cost.
fair enough, thank you.
And
And I had one other
Thank you. for that.
qualifying question, or in terms of what is considered the 45 feet, is that, for instance, if it was an existing home and it had a basement, is it 45 feet from the basement to the pitch, or is it from the first floor, not including the basement, to the pitch of the roof?
So that's interesting because we tweaked that section of the code several months back. And it depends on the type of roof that you have. If you have a pitched roof, it is measured from the infronting grade all the way up to the midpoint on the pitch. To the
On
midpoint
the
of
fronting grade.
Right where the structure meets
Sure.
the ground.
Okay.
Right, and so it's going to be measured straight up from there to the, on a pitched roof, it's going to be measured to the midpoint of that, and then on a flat roof, it's measured to the top of the parapet. I believe it's measured to the top of the parapet. It's either the top of the parapet or to the top of the roof itself, but generally your parapet wall is only about Oh,
2 to 3 feet.
2 to 3 feet, thank you. There was an architect in the room, I knew it. And so, and then on a sloped roof, it's going to be to the highest point of the sloped roof, which is generally going to be a roof that has some kind of a membrane on it.
Okay.
Something to point out is that because I pulled it up while Ms. Hodges was presenting that information to you, the current maximum height for buildings in the R2C, which is the single-family residential, is also 35 feet.
Okay.
So that's actually fairly common to find that type of height. Where the allowance allows you to really pop up is in the downtown.
I want to return to the parking. I know you said they could have shared parking or parking perhaps nearby. But suppose I'm looking at that property near the corner of Lamont and Whitney. And I don't know, I'm gonna build me a brew pub there. I'm gonna put my brew pub on the bottom floor and I'm gonna live on the top. So now I've got a 45-foot high structure, because that's allowed if I'm living on the top of it. Where do I get this shared parking? Because, you know, maybe there's only room for 2 or 3 cars in the driveway or whatever space adjacent to me, but am I relying on my neighbors for the rest of it, or where is that shared parking coming in?
It can come from several different methods or means. It can come from adjoining property owners where you partner with or you go under contract with someone. It can also come from on-street parking, so you can count the on-street spaces if there's on-street spaces allowed on particular streets. Not all streets have on-street parking allowed. So if on-street is allowed, that can be counted, as well as any public parking that is within a certain distance. Now, once you get beyond, I believe it's 300 feet, you can't count that anymore.
So,
And so
what if the neighbor next door to me has 4 cars and they rely on the on-street parking in front of their house just to get their cars, you know, parked on a nightly basis? Obviously, they don't own the road and I don't own the road, but could I potentially be counting the road space as public space? And so
absolutely, so could they.
So they could just be out of luck in being able to park their cars.
Or you're out of luck if they're there.
Whoever gets there first.
First come, first serve.
Right. So keep in mind, this is a normal conversation to occur in any urban environment. Again, the focus is not on the automobile. I realize how that sounds. I realize y'all are
Right.
probably hearing me say that. Oh gosh, here's a planner thinking everybody's gonna be walking again. But in this downtown environment, you do have a large number of pedestrians, and so folks oftentimes will park in other areas. I, for one, will oftentimes, when I want to go downtown, I find it nice to be able to park along Commerce Street parallel to Founders Park. I can always find an on-street space right there, and then I can go anywhere. And so again, they can count those spaces in front in terms of finding their minimum required. Keep in mind, too, that the minimum required for an MX1 is very different than your suburban parking space. It's not intended to account for every single vehicle and every single patron that might be joining your establishment.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Excellent
Yes.
question.
Yes, Jamie?
If you could just kind of give a quick synopsis of why MX1 may be more important now than it was 5 years ago to the growth of a city.
Sure.
I guess in terms of with the lack of annexation and the ability to have infill come in.
You almost just gave the entire answer right there in your question, and that is, now, the importance of infill is not arriving now just because cities can't involuntarily annex. It does happen that municipalities' boundaries are not growing outwards unless it's voluntary. But infill development and allowing for appropriate scaled infill is something that any community should support, as long as the zoning is appropriate and the uses are appropriate, and then the development standards match the character of the area. And so the importance of infill allows for your tax base to grow, allows for the city to grow, and allows for additional economic investment without infrastructure investment. Your infrastructure is already in place. Your roads, your sidewalks, your water, your sewer, your storm, all of that's already in place. That's one of the biggest negatives to annexing outward into the green spaces, is that you've got significant infrastructure investment into those outer areas. And so that's one of the benefits of the infill. You can grow your tax base without growing, or without too great of a cost on your infrastructure.
So-
But it's all about appropriateness.
So.
Thank you.
Really, there's no space in this footprint that we're talking about that's even vacant for new businesses or anything like that. You would have to rezone, take one of the properties and turn it into something else. So that's your definition of infill. You're allowing businesses now to find a place in a footprint. We also talk about infill when you've got vacant lots. Well, we don't have any vacant lots there. Every one of those parcels is a tax base right now.
Yes.
Right,
So
there
how-
are two vacant parcels that were recently sold by the city to
Yeah, we
a
did.
local developer. And so we do have vacant land in the area, but yes, I mean, that once and if those are developed on, then we would have no more vacant land. But I'll give you another example of the importance of the infill, and that's two words: adaptive reuse. And oftentimes you find along collector roadways or even arterial roadways that might have been heavily residential in the past. Maybe the road was even narrower in the past, or there was just less traffic in the past, and it was a comfortable residential street. Here's a good example. Think of going out Watauga and Unaka. You have those old, glorious, grand homes that line both Unaka and Watauga. And over time, they become less attractive for a variety of reasons, for that to just simply be strictly a single-family residential area. Oftentimes, the upkeep on those large homes is very expensive, and folks are looking to downsize, or just the cost of an older home and the rehab work. And so those areas should be allowed, and you've already done it through setting policy by changing the zoning along Watauga and Unaka, to allow those buildings to adaptively reuse. And that's the key term there. And so those have been able to convert into professional offices or doctor's offices or a salon, a variety of different uses. So the same concept applies along West Watauga, and even along the outer edge of Founders, but really along West Watauga, where you have an area that is still predominantly residential, but once you get to Lamont Street, from Lamont on down the hill, you can see that there's the house that's been for sale right here on the corner of Highland and West Watauga. Now, I can't tell you exactly how long it's been for sale. That the realtor could confirm that. But based on the information I received from the realtor and from the owner, having spoken to both of them at the October neighborhood meeting, that it just was no longer viable as a residence. And so the owner said, this would be a great opportunity. I certainly hope nobody tears this down, but once it's sold, it's sold. But his idea was, this is no longer viable as a residence. I really don't seek to rent this anymore as a residence, and if it can be converted into or adaptively reused into some use that is consistent with the scale and the character of the area, why couldn't that happen? So it's a great question, and the MX1 allows for those transitions to happen.
That's a better argument.
That is a better argument, yes. Okay. Are there any other questions of staff at this time?
Great questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Great questions. Thank you.
All right, then we are going to open a public hearing. We did all receive, I believe, an email from Lorraine Merman. Am I saying your last name correctly? Merwin, thank you. And it was extensive, so I want to enter that into the public record. Thank you. What I have done is taken the liberty of summarizing the point she made in this email because it was a 5 or 6 page email, and we typically only allow someone to speak for 3 minutes at our public hearing. So I'm going to start by reading a summary of her email, and then after that, I'll allow her to speak or anybody else to speak, if that's okay. All right. So this is an email that was received today, and she made a number of points. The first one dealt with alleys. She discussed there's a problem when the city partially abandons alleys. The access points become unclear, and there's often criminal activity associated with the alleys and those access points. The increased density due to businesses without adequate parking will make it likely that the alley access points will be blocked even more. So that was an argument against this MX1 zoning. Her second dealt with traffic. Traffic leads to a decreased cohesiveness and walkability of the neighborhood. The arterial and collector streets in older neighborhoods such as this are often inadequate for the traffic, so even though they have the high traffic volume, they were not really designed for that. Bush Creek, its future land use is residential, but the proposal here is to downgrade it from I2 to both B3 and R2. And so she would prefer to see it all residential. The University Parkway extension hurt the Mountain Home neighborhood. It increased a lot of speeding and cut through traffic through the neighborhood. One-way sections of Unaka and Watauga are currently a mishmash of residential, business, and retail, and they've lost the sense of neighborhood. Her next arguments deal with parking. Mixed-use businesses do not have to provide on-site parking. Older neighborhoods were not really designed to handle the 2 or more cars per family as we see typical today. They often have shared driveways or no driveways at all. There's a decreased number of city trees, and they are very hard to replace because a lot of people are resorting to parking in the curb strips, that space between the curb and the sidewalk. There's also parking on the sidewalks because of the inadequate amount of street parking. All of this decreases the walkability of the neighborhood, and there have also been several hit-and-run accidents to parked cars. Bush Creek, there's a drainage issue because all of these proposed rezoned properties will drain into Bush Creek. She believes there's health and safety issues associated with that. In Founders Park, the sidewalks are typically flooded even a week after rain. The grounds can become very boggy around them. The Walnut Street development is going to add to the Bush Creek flooding. The University Edge apartments have added substantially. She believes there's a need for regular inspection and maintenance of the storm retention measures that have been instituted. Walkability. Walkability is one of the major factors that makes neighborhoods neighborly. The city recently widened the sidewalk on Hamilton Street near Founders to 8 feet, but it leads to an area that's really unsafe to cross. There's poor visibility and the traffic speed is too high there. This widening of the sidewalk there, some residents believe is evidence that the city has already made up their mind about this rezoning. There is also only a single crosswalk on University Parkway within the Mountain Home neighborhood, which cuts off the neighborhood and makes it very difficult. Downtown hoarding. There's a belief that property owners are hoarding properties in downtown. They're not maintaining them or using them, and they're kind of holding on to them until the values ultimately increase. And so she proposes a vacant property tax. And she also thinks that adding MX1 to Mountain Home will delay downtown development and allow that property hoarding to continue. The existing retail in Mountain Home is currently not all in use. Several of the shops that were built as, or that were previously used as retail are no longer being used. So that is indicative that perhaps this is not necessary. Equity, there's a push for rezoning coming from the investors rather than the homeowners, and the homeowners would like to see a preservation of single-family homes. Voice of the neighborhood, don't believe that the neighborhood voice was previously heard when they expressed very strong opposition, particularly to University Edge Apartments. There was a very active neighborhood, and it was destroyed by the building of those apartments. Highland Avenue used to be home to many of the university professors and young professionals, but they lost their visibility to Buffalo Mountain due to the height of the apartments. Many homes now consequently are rental properties, and the TIF hurts the values of the homes, particularly on Highland. The pandemic has led to an increased number of remote workers, and so they believe that they need more residential near downtown, where people can live and work from home and then be able to walk downtown for services. The Tweetsy Bike Trail, mixed use in older neighborhoods should not begin until the existing retail is fully utilized. Existing neighborhoods without a link to downtown or Walnut might be appropriate for this type of zoning. So this proposal near the Tweetsy Bike Trail may be appropriate, but she'd like to see us preserve the residential character of Mountain Home. Downtown shopping and rezoning. She expressed report of some visitors who were with her. They walked through Founders Park. They wanted to get something to eat. They didn't really want to go to a brew pub. And they spotted Red Maze. And from there, they made multiple other stops at local downtown businesses and came back with their arms full of packages and were just delighted with what they found. Had there been a coffee shop or something on the residential side of Founders, they never would have discovered downtown. And so she summarizes by saying the rezoning of Mountain Home neighborhood should be vetoed by the city commissioners. The downtown needs to be well established. All existing retail zone properties in both the downtown and surrounding neighborhoods need to be utilized before we lose any more residential properties near the downtown that will support these businesses. The hoarding of properties needs to be stopped with a vacancy tax before you encroach any further. So, having that, and I'll enter this as well as her original document into the public record, so we'll pass these to Nicole later on. I'm now going to allow...
Chairman, before we start,
Yes.
just one correction for
Sure.
the record, since it goes into the public record. It's Brush Creek.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You put an R in, it's in her notes to
Okay,
Bush. So
okay.
we don't have an extra creek now, it's Brush Creek.
Okay, thank you. I
All right.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. And so at this time, what I'd like to do is open the public hearing to anyone, including Lorraine, if they wish to speak. And what I'll do is I'll ask that people come forward only one at a time, and we need you to state your name and address before you begin speaking, and we would ask that you try to limit what you say to about 3 minutes. Okay?
My name is Lorraine Brown. I live at 319 Lamont Street here in Johnson City. I believe in mixed-use zoning. We chose our home in part because we could walk downtown and that within our neighborhood there is such diversity, as was pointed out in your meeting in December. If there were a need for additional retail and business in our neighborhood, then all of the existing retail properties would be utilized. But the properties that are non-conforming in existing code and have retail rather than residential are either vacant or being used as residential, like one of the ones in your photos in the middle of the block on Lamont. Harold's Electric, that's now residential. To allow the mixed use at the edge of our neighborhood does not help our neighborhood, and it will do nothing but divert business from the downtown and the Walnut Street corridor. Mixed-use implementation is very different in new developments and in existing older neighborhoods. In older neighborhoods, mixed use should either be on a case-by-case basis as in the recent decision with the bike shop near the Tweetsie Trailhead, or after a thorough study of the neighborhood. What you are proposing here is neither. I have shared many of the concerns that should be examined prior to a widespread change in the neighborhood plan, such as traffic, parking, alleys. We've had the police knock on our door to find out where the nearest alley access is. This will be only more complicated by this spot zoning of mixed use blocking alleys. Water runoff, pedestrian safety, etc. I understand the Church Brothers property being changed to B3, and I don't have strong feelings about whether the shopping strip at 905 Watauga is changed to mixed use or B3. I am glad to see that all of the city-owned properties are to be changed to R2, but the rest of the proposal makes no sense. In the December meeting discussing mixed use, one goal was to protect neighborhoods by not including lots that face into neighborhoods, lots that are on side streets. All of the properties on Highland, Lamont, and Whitney are on side streets and do not adjoin a collector street. So why are they being considered for mixed use? Whether Watauga Avenue or Commerce Street can be considered collector streets depends on which block you're looking at. So these should be considered on a case-by-case basis. I expect that if the zoning had been addressed before the sale of the city-owned property at 316 Commerce Street, it would also be changed from I2 to R2, just like the adjoining lot at 324 Commerce Street. This leaves only one property that you are proposing be changed to mixed use, and that is 803 Watauga. There are problems with this being business or retail, including it being at the end of an alley, and pedestrian safety. It may be that these issues can be overcome, but they should be looked at, and it is more appropriate that they are looked at with a specific proposal for a specific use, rather than as a tool to make the sale of the property easier or more profitable. There is a great demand for residential property in our neighborhood, and if you're pointing out specific residential homes that aren't being rented, I suggest that maybe the code inspector should look at them and see why people don't feel safe living in them. When I look at the lots you propose for mixed use in our neighborhood, I do not see a plan. I do not see a benefit for our neighborhood or for our city. The investors, because these properties are all owned by investors, not residents, will not lose money by making these properties R2. But their neighbors are likely to lose equity in their homes by allowing mixed use without first knowing specifically what is proposed. It is much harder to change properties that have been developed as business to residential than it is to go from residential to business, so this is not something that should be rushed into. We want to revitalize the downtown and the West and the Walnut Street corridor, and the existing business properties along Roan, Main, and Market. But at this point in time, there are too many underutilized properties that are already zoned for business that need to be occupied. You have a small population now that lives close to the downtown, and a small population that is willing to drive downtown and walk around. If you spread out the revitalizing of businesses too thin, too fast, all of it is destined to fail. In your meeting, you say that the developers want this, the December meeting that I watched on Zoom, but it is your job to direct the development. The developers owe their fealty to the sellers and buyers, but you owe your fealty to the city as a whole and to the residents. At this point, all those properties in the mountain home should be residentially zoned, and they should be downzoned for lower density. Mixed use should be considered on a base on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
Any questions? I'd also like to point out that that blue house is single-family. The one that you showed up there on the right, the one on Lamont, it's only 2 houses from me. That one is single-family. And I know I asked for something more comprehensive, and I just saw it today, but a lot of it is not comprehensive. The traffic plan, it is not comprehensive. It has confused what is arterial and what is Collector Street, and if you want more details, I'll tell you that, but I know I've gone over my time limit. Anything else?
Thank you very much. You've organized your thoughts very well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,
you.
thank you very
Enjoyed your
much
email.
for taking the time to share that with us. It is very helpful. We appreciate it. All right, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this matter?
Good evening. I'm Michael Manzi. I own 2 lots. It's 312 and 316 Commerce Street. And my lots are empty. I'm really not in the middle of the neighborhood, but I'm considered part of the neighborhood. All I can tell you is I am a developer. I own where Freiberg's is, and I took downtown on in 2007 when people would not even put a business down there. I spent over $500,000 developing that building. I'm currently building at 104 Tipton for Raphael, the new restaurant that's going on the end. Downtown is booming. There is a demand. If you look at Founders Park, where my property sits, at the end, at nighttime, daytime, it is packed. I've had multiple people come up to me saying they would love to have a place to go on that end of the park, to grab a cup of coffee, to eat a Danish, to have a bagel. The people that are moving into the mill as well are going to have offices there. I've talked to some people that are moving in there. They would love to come across the street at lunchtime and have a coffee or something like that. So in regards to is there a demand and does the community want it, on my end, and I've been living here since 92 and I went to college here in 79, and there is a demand. And I'm also from Alexandria, Virginia, which if you've ever been to Old Town, it's where George Washington's from, born and raised. Parking downtown, there is multi-use with houses, and that's how a city grows. And people, yeah, we have to walk 4 blocks to get to wherever we're going. But right now downtown, if you go eat at Label on a Friday night, you're going to walk 4 or 5 blocks. That's just part of it. And it's part of the ambiance of downtown. And I think it's continued to grow. As you see with Togger Brewery, more buildings are getting taken over every day. And you're going to continue to see, especially with gambling coming, more people are moving here every day from the Northeast, and it's just going to explode. And I think that's the whole reason why you guys are also looking at the Walnut Corridor. Same reason. It's a good tax base, but I can tell you there's a need in that park for people to come in, grab a cup of coffee. They would love it. It's a cool mix. It's what most downtowns do. And again, I'm going to put up a beautiful building like I always do, and it's going to benefit the city. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this matter? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and open the table for discussion amongst commissioners.
I have some additional questions for staff, if
Sure.
that's all right. Mr. Mitchell. When we dealt with this back in December, is that when it was?
Yes, ma'am.
One of the positions I took was the bundling of all these things, and I was having a real hard time with that. I wanted to see kind of a breakdown of how each of the properties really had the case for changing the zoning from residential to mixed use. So they still are bundled, but just a smaller group of them. So
Sure.
I still have kind of issues with that. I can look at Mr. Manzi's property right here, and it's on the outer edges of it. It's closest to the park. And when we sold that property to you, we knew you were going to, wanted to develop that for, and you told us what you wanted to develop it for. So it kind of fit in. That was more of a quieter area, a business, a coffee shop, that kind of thing. And so I think Ms. Merriman, I'm sorry, Merriweather, I apologize.
Merwin.
Yeah, has a really good point about the cases for where and why some of these properties may be considered. The one that would be west of Mr. Mancy's property, the MX1 there, right kind of on that corner, now is more interior.
Can you use a pointer,
Are
or
you talking about Lamont and Whitney? 'Cause
Yes,
that's the one I
yeah,
have concerns
yeah.
about too.
is that the one you're considering, where he's pointing, or are you talking?
Yeah, right there. Right. Uh-huh. So Mr. Manzy's is to the right of that, the MX1, right there. So it sits right on the edge. There's a parking lot below him. It's more open. The homes I think there are only 2 homes in that particular area. So I don't know what the cases are for all the rest of them. I do understand Church Brothers, understand that very well. And then the city property to R2. These 2 on Watauga, and I don't disagree with you that, the argument about adaptive use for those, maybe all they're, are suitable for in the future because of their location and traffic and all that. So do we have uses for those 2 on Watauga? I mean, are there projections, or is just the property owner would like to have them rezoned?
Well, he's had a number of conversations with folks who are potential buyers, but, we can't at this stage lock somebody in.
I understand that.
Right, and so he's had conversations with a baker. He had conversations with, I believe, a bookstore, if my memory is, because this goes back to October. But I definitely remember the baker. And something to point out with this particular piece of property here, this gentleman, former city employee, walked down to the tent on that Saturday morning and expressed his interest in being a part of the rezoning because he knew that the city had applied the MX1 on this piece. See, I actually
Which
feel-
is this and this? I'm not.
See the cursor?
Oh, I
Okay,
don't.
so-
Okay. Now I see the cursor. I'm sorry.
the gentleman owns this piece right here.
Okay.
And he knew that this piece that had been sold by the city to another private property owner, similar to Mr. Manzi, somebody who has an interest in investing in the area, that property was zoned MX1. So I should have the zone map turned on to show you that actually this gentleman's property right here would create an MX1 frontage just there along the outer edge of the block face.
So that,
And-
I thought that was the case.
Yes.
So that has been approved and done.
Right.
Kristen, is that the only mixed one right there?
MX1 right here
That's
is,
the only one?
is the only current one, correct, yes.
But you have residential between the two proposed MX1s, correct? So I'm looking at 5 residential
Right.
lots. Are those all currently occupied with residential single-family homes?
They are, they
One
are.
of them's a new home that's only been built maybe 3
Yeah.
years ago.
And those folks, actually, one of those folks came down, one of these homes directly across the street from this property came down, walked down to the tent that morning and indicated their support for the rezoning. So we've not received any opposition from the property owners that, or the occupants that live in this block right here.
Let's go back to Watauga.
Sure.
Where would people park on some kind of small business there on Watauga?
Well, luckily for this property owner, he has, this lot right here is vacant. And so most likely, if this was adaptively reused, there are 2 buildings sitting on that lot right now. There's the old Victorian home, and then there's a commercial structure. One of those commercial structures was in the picture with the orange roof. And so that lot has 2 homes, or 2 structures on it, and then this lot right here, right next to it, is vacant. And so presumably, if the area was adaptively reused or redeveloped, that they would incorporate parking in that area.
What about the one lower to it?
I'm sorry?
The one down below it, is that where the florist
That's the
is?
florist.
It is. That's
Okay, so-
that's quite a large lot.
So they have parking in there.
Right.
Piggybacking on Jenny's concerns, is there a reason that we could not take these properties one by one? And, I mean, they're all bundled together in this one rezoning proposal right now. I'm comfortable with some, I'm less comfortable with others. Is there a reason we could not take them one by one and vote on, you know, whether we support the rezoning or don't before we send it to city commission? And then what I would like to see is, even with the one that you said was a former city employee, and perhaps there is some support of residents around there, I would like to see more of a proposal and know what are they going to do with that and come before us, rather than before I would be comfortable just rezoning it MX1 for anybody in the future to
For me,
plan
the
for.
challenge with doing that is the zoning is the zoning, the business can change. So that's my struggle with saying, well, what are you gonna do with the property? That's why I asked earlier, what's the worst use you could do? And, you know, Ms. Brown, it's very eloquent what you said. Mr. Manzi, spot on. I mean, you both have compelling arguments for your cases. And this is where we're at. I mean, it's just it's a hard, you know, it's a hard decision on planning. And, but both of you make compelling arguments, and I thank you for that.
But do we need to consider it all together, or?
Is there any risk of spot zoning when you do that?
No. I'm very comfortable that none of this constitutes spot zoning. Spot zoning has been, through the courts, state and federal levels, many years, and it is now much harder to confirm spot zoning. If there is existing development patterns in an area, including existing policies that have been adopted, both of those would be considered by the courts.
Okay.
And so it's very difficult to claim spot zoning. Spot zoning almost has to be obvious.
Fair enough, thank you.
I think one of the other things, and, you know, I understand about parking downtown.
Sure.
You know, there's no parking, you use public parking, and so that's acceptable. The city provides public parking. It's tight, but we do. In this one, we don't address it to the point of where there's going to be adequate parking, except to push people out to the streets. So you've got residents there. I know along these houses, you've got single driveways, so people are pulling in behind each other, you know, backing out, so they park they use the street parking. So now you're going to have a business in there. So one of the other questions would be, what kind of business could go in there that would create the most parking needs? Where Mr. Manzi is considering parking, there's a parking lot right down below it, so that's where the overflow will go. But if you're down in the middle of the block, or down on the Watauga side, up the top one up there, you're not going to have that kind of public parking available. So now you're going to be taking up parking spots that have historically been used by the residents. That does concern me. I mean, any of us would not be happy, you know, if all of a sudden we couldn't find our normal parking place.
On the flip side of that, I grew up in a neighborhood very similar to what's going on here in Roanoke, Virginia. And on one side was a 7-Eleven, and the other side was a bodega. And no one ever drove to them. It was bike or walk. But again, it was a different, you know, you're not looking at a restaurant, you're not looking at a bar or something like that. And again, with 2,000 square feet, I don't know if that's even feasible to do something like that. But, you know, when I see this, I've seen this in my head, and I've lived it, and it does make it, you know, does it hurt the neighborhood? I didn't really see that as a young man or a young kid at the time, but
And
I can see the benefit both ways.
I can't imagine someone wanting to build if they didn't have adequate parking. You know, I mean, somehow I think that they would have to, just like Mr. Manzi, he has parking, and then he has the parking down below that he can do it. I don't think on the Watauga side, like you said, you know, we're just talking about a 2,000 square foot building, right? And so,
Footprint.
excuse me?
Footprint.
Right. And so, you know, I think on that particular lot, there would be probably adequate parking. you know, by the time that you build the building. I
Adding the
don't know,
50.
unless they're gonna use the existing building. I can't imagine that, but they could.
Quarter acre.
Right.
And then the one, I think where you said the city employee owned, I'm assuming that
35,
it would not be
60 is an
too
acre.
far from where Mr. Mancy's, parking, his people are parking now, would it?
He probably falls within the 300 feet. Mr. Campbell's piece, the one directly below it that's in MX1, falls in that area. Plus, you can account for whatever would be allowed on street. Keep in mind, too, that it's easy to take yourself to the scale of a Walgreens, let's just say. That's roughly 15,000 square feet. That's an easy place to take yourself. And knowing that type of outfit needs to have minimum number of spaces on site. The square footage of the MX1 obviously being capped, but then not only that, but what the land itself can produce. For example,
Yeah,
this
what are the
lot
lot
right
sizes?
here is, we could pull up the exact square footage, but very small. And so he's going to be limited on his setbacks, on just his square footage allowances anyway.
So that's another great point. Are there different setbacks on the MX1? If, like, let's just say you have a lot, existing structure on it, tear the structure down, put a new structure up. Within the MX1, do we change the setbacks from where they were before?
Yes.
So what would those setbacks be?
They. She is on it.
Thank you, Whitney.
Is now a good time to put her in for a raise?
Get
They
her out
are
full-time.
reduced setbacks. So in the front yard, no front yard setback is required. However, still have to recognize the 7 1/2 foot drainage and utility easement. Side yard, no side yard setback, again, unless there is the
So less
7
restrictive on setbacks.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then the rear yard, the same for drainage and utility.
So 7.5 front and
easements
back?
and rear,
Okay.
correct.
And what on the sides?
7.5.
Zero.
So
If
7.5
there is
all
a-
around.
If there's a drainage and utility easement. If there's not a drainage and utility easement, then it would fall to 0. But again, that actually matches the size of the lots that you typically find in an MX1 zone.
Okay, but if the neighbor next door is R2, what is it to the property line, 15 feet?
Well, that falls back to the buffer, right?
Right, there's gonna be a buffer
I
requirement.
understand that, but I just
Right.
want to know. So currently, in that R2 is 15 feet?
For the rear or for the side?
Sides.
Sides,
And most of those homes right in that area are very close together.
Right. Side yard is 8 feet.
8 feet, okay. So from structure to structure, then
Can't ever be less than 10 because of fire code.
It's close.
So you could have 16.
At least, right, because of the buffer, right?
Okay.
So the side setback would be a minimum of 18.
Between buildings would be 18.
Between okay, not the property line, but the building.
Because of the buffer,
Uh-huh.
that would be the 10 feet. So if you were going between buildings, there is 18 feet.
I like your math better than my math.
Well, and I'm glad she pointed that out because when the buffer is going to manage that is when you have a change in the zoning. When you have a situation where MX1 abuts another MX1 zone, then there's no need to have that buffer, and so you can allow for those setbacks to be closer.
Preston, if this was approved, do you foresee the potential for those 4 or 5 residential properties that are currently fronting, I guess, Lamont and Whitney Street, between the 2 proposed MX1s being rezoned in the future to MX1? Or do you think that those would still remain residential, and then you'd have, I'm still having a tough time getting my head around having an MX1 in what looks like a center of a neighborhood. And I know it's not really, but that property that's, there on the corner of Lamont and Whitney right now almost looks like it's, in the middle of a residential neighborhood to me.
it's wedging 5
Right.
residents together
Right.
in between.
So,
Well, I can, obviously I don't have a crystal ball and you know, in terms of what's going to happen, but the city is not going to initiate another rezoning. Now, if the property owners chose to do that, then they could certainly do so. But the city would not take that next step. Now, I would like to add, though, and this speaks to one of the comments from Ms. Brown, is that this first part of the neighborhood that has been included in this zoning study was intended to be a first phase of study. Her request for a larger scale study is planned, and something that we had wanted to do was to do another zoning study further north as you go up West Watauga towards Market and Main. Again, to see whether or not there was interest and whether or not, and what the current land uses are, what the viability is for continued residential versus adaptive reuse, what vacant lots might we have. So certainly there is, this is not the city blindly responding to a developer asking to rezone their basically have the city rezone the property for them. We had been approached by the realtor for the corner lot on West Watauga and Highland. But then I had also had conversations with Mr. Manzi, and have had a number of conversations with folks in the area. And so because of these conversations and because of the rezoning that occurred on Mr. Campbell's piece right here, these two city lots that were sold, if you recall, the original proposal from staff was that both of these would go MX1, and ultimately it was decided that the interior one would maintain residential and that the outer one right here would go MX1. And now if you drive out there today, you would see that Habitat is building a home on that second lot. And so additional housing being built in the area, which is great. But then you've got comments and suggestions coming from folks like that gentleman who say there is a need and a desire, market need. And the market is driving this, that there is a market need on this western end of the park. And so again, our response to these conversations was, hey guys, let's do a zoning study on this. And so that's what we embarked upon last September and spent many, many hours on this, and then had our October 24th tent meeting, trying to engage the community and see what the thoughts were.
Madam Chairman, I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Well, let's wait. Are we still in our
Yes, we
discussion? The two things that jump out at me: one, if in fact we're trying to encourage a walkable community, and two, we've got property owners that have visions for those four pieces of property that lead them to MX1. I can't help but think that this is consistent with at least our overall philosophy of trying to improve the walkability and not do away with the automobile, but at least just make the automobile not near as a necessary part of our day-to-day life. And I would love to live in a neighborhood, in fact, I kind of do right now, in a neighborhood where I can walk to get a cup of coffee, I can walk to get that bagel that Preston spoke about, I can walk down the street and get a pizza, and I don't have to get in my car. To me, that is very desirable, and I will be real surprised, Mr. Mancy can probably speak to this, that developers that are looking at these three pieces of property are not going to come in there and put something that's not useful to the community, to the neighborhood.
Good point.
Just my perspective.
Could I address something Ms. Merwin, Lorraine, okay, brought up? You mentioned in your email about the West Walnut Street corridor project adding to the stormwater problems in that neighborhood. It's just the opposite. In fact, there is.
Yeah, she needs to speak.
Please,
She needs
yeah.
to come up to the microphone.
Yeah.
Because it will have another retention pond.
There will be stormwater detention over on West Walnut Street. Plus, there's already a project underway right now that brings some of the runoff that comes across state of Franklin under and into the creek further down. So it's really going to improve it.
Well, we hope it will. But we were told the same thing about University Edge Apartments, that they were going to be helping with the flooding. And if I'm not sure if it's considered a retention pond or a retention basin, but it needs to be looked at because it is not in good repair and is not working and is adding to the problem. And our neighborhood is walkable. We have banks we can walk to. We have a mini mart. We have a laundromat. We walk downtown. And we have a lot of diversity in the people that live there and in the businesses that are there. But I think what you need to think of is how fast can we proceed with it, with these mixed-use zonings? Because you want people walking downtown, and you want people walking along the corridor. You can't spread this out that much. And our neighborhood is mainly working class people. I mean, one person that I was speaking to said, you know, we're not going to be able to afford a cup of coffee there between our two jobs. So I don't want you pulling away. And I feel like that's what some of what this mixed use, the lots that are being considered will do. They'll pull away from the downtown. Because at this point, we have the diversity that you say that you're looking for. I mean, what businesses can you think of that we can't walk to now, that a lot of us don't walk to now?
If nothing else, it's a shorter walk.
Well, it's a shorter walk, but don't you want people going ahead and walking downtown?
Yes, ma'am, but I truly believe with both downtown and especially once the city gets through with the initial phase of Walden Street, we're not going to have a problem with folks wanting to come downtown Johnson City.
Okay.
I mean, and developers can speak to the increase in value of even the pieces of property downtown that are literally falling down.
Which is one of the mistakes I think that our city has made, is letting people sit and wait for the city to make changes, to buy the land and hoard the land. Mr. Mancy at least cleared his lot because he didn't want to be a landlord. So the lot that he had owned, he had cleared and kept mowed. Now somehow he and one other person knew that this was going to be mixed use in January of 2020 before anyone else knew, which I don't think was right. But there are many people who own these properties and are not maintaining them because they're waiting for the city to make the changes and make the investments.
I'm gonna just stop you and add something, because that's getting a little off topic of this, but I do want to let you know those concerns have been held, and just earlier last week we had another subcommittee meeting, and there was discussion of reinvigorating our blight task force and addressing the issues of vacant properties, both downtown and throughout the whole city and things like that. So that is something that is on our radar. I suspect it's something fairly high on our to-do list and projects list. So I appreciate your concerns there, but it's something that's going to be addressed.
Thank you.
Okay. I think I got off topic, but I did answer
Yeah.
your question. Or you wanted to speak to me about the runoff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
be assured,
And I
we're not
babbled.
investing that amount of money over there to increase the flooding, for sure. No, there's a good plan in place, so hope you'll have confidence. And the thing on the parking, and I'm probably a little more sensitive than everybody up here because we just get hammered on parking
Sure you
all
do.
the time
Sure you do.
downtown. And so you're either going to have all the customers from the neighborhood and then people who have already parked downtown and walk up that way, or you're gonna have people coming in for the other parts of the city to experience all that. They're gonna need a place to park.
But I think the good news, Jenny, is that that is high on y'all's radar. I mean,
It
it's
is-
something
it
you
is high.
you recognize is a challenge that the city's going to step in
It
and
is.
help with, not leave it to each developer to solve his own problems, which I think is appropriate.
Well, it is. There are no good solutions right now, so
No.
we're working on it. And so, that being said, if we're gonna start adding businesses that will attract more traffic, it's a logical thing. We do require traffic, or parking with development. You know, you have to have so many spaces for whatever you anticipate. This is a little different, so.
But it's not all that different than what the challenge we've got on Walnut Street. I mean, we're gonna have to come up with some way
Put some
of
public-
providing
public
parking
in-
that the
yeah.
developer cannot provide.
Right. And we are addressing that in this
Sure.
overall plan.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Good lively discussion. I'm glad to have it.
Is there additional discussion amongst commissioners?
Call the question.
What? Yes.
Yeah, I look at these MX1 parcels as a typical unit that's required in a small scale to serve a neighborhood. It's a neighborhood services that would go in there. So I don't have a problem with them if we keep them contained. And I think they're so close to the state of Franklin that the traffic is not going to increase that much. I think they're going to be more a neighborhood use. So I don't have an issue with the scale of these. They've been pulled down quite a bit, and I think the zoning will take care of them.
Okay. Other discussion? All right, then I'm looking for someone to make a motion here.
I move that we approve the rezoning of the 6 properties as defined in the staff's proposal.
A second.
1, 2, 3, 4,
5, 6.
6 properties.
6 properties,
Excuse me.
yes.
Do we need to do each zone separately?
No, you do not need to, because it's been proposed to you as one. That's why GIS has created that map that way.
Okay.
So if you wanted, you could simply, if you're in support of it, you could just simply indicate recommending approval of rezoning 1067 as revised.
Okay. So we
Did you
have
get-
a,
Did you get my second?
yes, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Cooper, a second by Tembra, and is there any additional discussion?
I would prefer that they're separated. That would be my preference. It's harder for me to vote on them as a block, and I indicated that 6 weeks ago.
I concur, Jenny, I really do. I'm more comfortable after our discussion with the rationale for at least 3 of the 4 properties. There's one that still I'm not comfortable with.
Or which one?
The,
Or what are either both of you proposing?
Whitney.
yeah,
I need cursors, I'm sorry. Or point.
Are you all talking about this one?
Yes,
yeah.
To approve or not approve?
not approved.
And realize
And
that
approve
the
the
property
ones on
right
next
south of
year's.
that is also MX1.
Yeah, the property below it's MX1, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This one right here.
Yeah, but I'm just not comfortable with the one that seems like it's in the middle of the block.
It's a great little intersection that'll be a nice little gathering place.
See, I was more
Somebody's gonna
comfortable with
come-
the one on,
Come and want to rezone the property just west of Mr. Mancy.
I was more comfortable with the one on Watauga.
Yeah, the one on Watauga and Highland is also concerning to me. That would be the
That's the only
second
one I
one.
was in, was there any with these properties, there was no abandonment of alleyways, correct?
No, not at all. And in fact, staff would support the comments made by Ms. Brown about the loss of urban alleyways. That's something that anytime there's a proposal to abandon an alleyway, especially in these older neighborhoods, we look at it very carefully. That is not something that is taken lightly.
Fair enough, thank you.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? All right, then. Nicole, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Brock,
Well, I'm going to get to vote on it again, but we'll let it go through. I'll vote yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Commissioner Rhodey,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
and Chairwoman Wild.
No.
Motion was approved as revised.
All right. Moving on to new business then, and we thank you all for your participation. Feel free to hang out for the rest of the meeting, or if you want to quietly disappear, we won't hold it against you. But thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. They are important to us. All right, we're going to move on to new business then, and the first item on our agenda is the Vintech Subdivision Preliminary Plat.
Good evening, Chairwoman Wild, Chairman Cooper, Commissioners. I've got to try to remember what I'm here to talk about now. We've received requests for preliminary plat approval for a Vintec subdivision, which is a 4-lot subdivision intended for future industrial development. And with this preliminary plat, there'd be a future road dedication with the extension of the right-of-way known as Business Way. Business Way, this is in the gray area. Business Way connects to Bobby Hicks Highway in gray. The lots meet all the subdivision regulation standards. The property is zoned I-1, so the future proposed development aligns with the current zoning. The real issue of discussion here tonight concerns a variance request to Figure 12 of of this street cross section in the subdivision regulations. This Figure 12 local non-residential street. Now, at the time of this report and at the time these slides were created, the request was to replace this 8-foot multi-purpose lane with a 5-foot sidewalk on the south side of the proposed street, and to eliminate the sidewalk and walk on the north side of the proposed street. So essentially getting rid of one sidewalk and replacing the multi-purpose lane with a sidewalk. Lose the sidewalk, have a sidewalk instead of a multi-purpose lane. The rationale for that variance was that there is a stream that runs north-south across the property. There's going to be a bridge will be required to be built. To cross the stream, TDEC will have to issue the developer an aquatic resource alteration permit, or an ARAP. The developer wanted to limit the disturbance to the creek to increase their chances for getting the permit. Also, with the placement of a box culvert that would be required on the north side sidewalk, that would require that box culvert would be placed over an existing water line. Water line would have to be moved. And with this road ending in a cul-de-sac, there'd be no possible extension of the sidewalk down to this neighborhood. That was the rationale for the variance. That was the original variance request. Staff looked at it, analyzed this. There is an extensive sidewalk network that's already in this area. There was down here is the stub where the proposed business way would connect into the existing business way. This area, as you can see, is zone B5. We have a new Kentucky Fried Chicken up here that was required to put in a sidewalk. There is a multi-purpose lane that's already existing. There's a sidewalk that's already existing. So staff was not in support of the variance request because we would like to see the multi-purpose lane and the sidewalk connected. Now, it's my understanding, and I will let the applicant speak to this in the public hearing because I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it's my understanding that perhaps now the variance request is to not request what we discussed here, but rather just simply to eliminate the 2 feet grass sections on this cross section at the bridge. So You'd have a 55-foot right-of-way. You would have a 55-foot right-of-way all the way down the street and even across the bridge. But this section would condense at the bridge and then flare back out across the bridge. So I don't want to put words in the applicant's mouth. That discussion took place, but I suppose you can hear from him in the public hearing.
Will, how does Bob Davis Road come into play here?
With the address?
Yeah.
Current, let me go back to the plat here. Right now, the property has frontage on Bob Davis Road. They have frontage through this street stub here.
So that whole piece of property extends all the way to that, through that
That's correct.
residential?
This is one lot. This is one lot here, and the subdivision would be 1 lot, 2 lot, 3 lots, 4 lots. So they have frontage on 156 Bob Davis Road, or at Bob Davis Roads. The address is 156. That's where they have their frontage. But to be able to create this lot, or these 4 lots, they're going to have to build this street to have frontage on Business Way. Then the address
But
would
there
change.
won't be any access from Bob Davis?
They have the intent, and actually, planning staff, this is one of those rare cases where planning staff did not find it favorable to have interconnectivity all the way from Business Way into the neighborhood. Normally, we like interconnectivity. We took a look at it and said, it's going to be primarily industrial traffic, so we don't want it dumping in. At Bob Davis, it's short enough a drive around Bob Davis to get up to Bobby Hicks anyway, so we didn't see the need for interconnectivity. But there is technically, the lot does have frontage on Bob Davis at this time, but there's no, and that's another reason why we would like to see the cul-de-sac here, so there's no possible extension that the street would be built into that neighborhood.
Is there a way to ensure that that never happens? Because that's literally a residential area down there.
This lot here, these lots here would still front on, still have frontage here, but there's no intent to build a street.
But they could.
Then why are they building a bridge?
What's that?
The bridge is up top.
Oh, up top?
The bridge is up top here.
All right, thanks.
They could.
I would point out, there is no control strip on this stub. There's no control strip on the stub, but the idea is that we've spoken, whether as far as what I have heard for the developer's intent, they have no desire to extend this street. It's just a lot of cost that they would have, and I know Mr. Wood can speak about a lot of those, a lot of the particular reasons of why they don't want to extend this street. There's a lot of cost associated with
Would you
it.
comment, what is a control strip?
Oh,
I've been on
control
the commission
strip,
a
we
long time,
had a
but I don't know
couple
that
of
one.
them.
Oh,
Yeah,
you missed them
we
last
kind of
month.
joke around that we have, that things come into us in batches. We usually get them in 2s or 3s. We haven't had control strips since my very first planning commission, 3 years ago. Then we had 2 of them last planning commission.
And I was not.
The control strip is a strip that is put on the end of street stubs at the end of subdivisions.
For future connectivity.
That are, give the city some control, and the planning commission has to grant approval for people to tie into the control strip. You can use it to ensure that the proper traffic, you have compatible traffic for, if it's going in through a neighborhood, that you're not gonna have a lot of industrial traffic and that sort of thing. It also is used to make sure that you don't landlock any, that the planning commission will be able to look at plats and ensure that we're not going to landlock any lots in future subdivisions of the property beyond the control strip. So, there is no plan to build this street. That's a good thing. Todd, Mr. Wood, I know, can speak a lot of specifics as to the costs of what it would cost to extend that street and tie into Bob Davis Road, and they have no intention of doing that and spending the money associated with it. But it does have frontage
Thank you.
per the existing plat. So, with that in mind, like I said at the time of the slide, when I prepared it, the variance requests as they were presented in your packet, but staff would recommend to grant approval of the preliminary plat without granting approval of those variance requests, but if that variance request has been amended to just eliminate the 2-foot grass section on each side at the bridge, then we would recommend approval of the plat with the granting of that particular variance request. And I'll let the applicant speak for themselves on that.
It sounds like we need to hear from Mr. Wood as to what variance they're currently requesting.
I'll take that back to the plat and, did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Do I need to open a public meeting for Mr. Wood to speak? Okay. All right, then. We'll hold off on questions until we get more clarification from the applicant. So at this time, let's go ahead and open the public meeting, and we will invite anybody wishing to speak forward.
Good evening. Todd Wood, 1804 Galen Drive, Johnson City. I'm the engineer for the applicant on this. Before I get to the variance request to explain what we're going to ask for now after discussion with staff this evening, I want to point out just a couple things. So up here where the road comes through, the property, this large property has 55 feet. This was obviously intended to be the road extension from years ago. Cedar Creek is right here, coming through here. Our property line, when it comes through and widens, isn't until you get down here. So Cedar Creek is not on our property except for within that 55-foot strip. The city's existing water main is right in this area, just inside the 55-foot strip. So one of the things we need to do in order to cross that creek, it also has a floodplain. So we have to be very careful how we do that. We have to get permits from the state. We have to get permits from the city. We have to meet the floodplain ordinance. We have to minimize our disturbance. Plus, your city water department would prefer we not build something on top of their water line, which makes a lot of sense. Or if we had to move it, we'd have to move it off-site onto property we don't own. So in that section right here, let me get up here again, right in this area, we need to narrow the road down. Whether we cross it with the actual bridge or cross it with box culverts, which are square concrete or rectangular structures, it needs to be narrowed down. So Public Works has said they really want the multi-purpose lane extended and they want the sidewalk. We can do that, but what we need is the flexibility to take out the grass strips. Basically put the multi-purpose lane and the sidewalk right up against the back of the curb. Now, coming into the section, so up here, we'd start with the normal section, but then we'd have to start to taper it till we get to here and cross and be no grass strip. And then by the time we got somewhere in this area, we'd probably taper back out and we'd have the full section again.
Including the grass strips.
Including the grass strips, yes. So we would have those in there, but it's just in that bridge section, there'd be no grass strip, and then it would gradually taper back to the full grass strip. So that's the only variance request before you. I would like to point out one other thing. I don't want to open up a can of worms, but I also want to be careful that my client doesn't get kind of pushed back into a corner. So as was mentioned, the property fronts here on Business Way, but also fronts on Bob Davis. This is not a right-of-way. This is private property. You know, they have legal road frontage on Bob Davis Road. They are planning to construct their new facility on this lot. They have approval, site plan approval, not building permit approval, to do that at this time. The only way to get there initially is Bob Davis Road. So the reason why I'm bringing this up, I don't want to open up a can of worms that's not part of this, but I was also, I just encourage you not to approve the subdivision with some requirement that they can't use this, because that's the only way they can access the property right now. Eventually, they will access this. So the way that the site plan has been approved, it has a driveway that comes in, wraps around, comes up, and shows a future stub to this cul-de-sac with the note that this driveway connection here, once this is built, would either go away or it might be gated with fire access if the fire department saw that that was beneficial for some reason. But their intent is not to use this as their main entrance. But initially, they may have to, depending on the timing of when things are constructed.
For what period of time?
That's hard to say. It depends. Initially, this was their main focus, to do their development here first. It's now shifted, and that's why we're here, is they want to do the subdivision first and then build their structure. So if that's the case, they'll build this and then they'll build this. Or it could be that they're done concurrently, and so you may have some construction traffic that has to come in through here. It's unfortunate, but it's the only way to access the property. So they could be done concurrently, or the subdivision road might be there first.
So are there any other businesses, industrial businesses accessing Bob Way now currently?
You mean Business Way up here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's.
No,
I'm talking
Bob's
about
Way.
Bob
Oh.
Davis.
Oh, Bob Davis? No, no. The only, I'm
So
not
I mean-
aware if there's any more down, this way. Well, I guess Bob Davis is really just back this way, so there's no others there. That's all residential lots.
Was the intended, I don't know the history of the plat, but was it, I mean, it seems like it was probably intended to have access, right?
I believe the intent, when you look at, because this is also 55 feet wide down here, the intent was for that road to go through. The water and sewer lines are already there.
So it did, there
Yeah.
was plans.
So there was a plan. However, the problem is, we could not, we tried to see if this road could be physically constructed. Even if we took out the sidewalks and just graded to the edge of the curb and had no sidewalk, no grass strip, 24 feet the curb, and then it sloped down, we'd still have to grade on these two properties,
Okay.
here and there. And chances are, probably would not get that easement.
No, that's all residential.
That's all residential. So we tried to see if that road could go through there. It physically doesn't work. We can get a narrow driveway through there, but we can't get a public street through there.
All right, thanks, sir.
So why can't, if they build in this little, I can't point there. Well, let's say that's a cul-de-sac right there in the center, the circle.
Mhm.
Is that a cul-de-sac?
Yes. Mhm.
So why can't they access that property from there?
Well, they will be able to, once this is built, they'll be able to access all these lots from that. Right now, Business Way ends right here, and this is just grass going down to the creek.
So they're building faster than that's going to be completed.
Well, like I said, initially, they thought they were going to build their structure here first and then come back in and do the subdivision. Now their focus has shifted to more of the subdivision. So the plan that I have been told is that they want to build this or at least get started with this, my guess is they'll probably do them concurrently. So there may be, and actually some initial traffic very well may have to come in here because you're going to have to build the bridge from both sides.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to access through Bob Davis no matter what. But the applicant's very sensitive. They know it's somebody's neighborhood. They're building right behind them. They have to come in through there. And so they're trying to do it in the most sensitive way they can.
But there's no work going on right now in that, there's no building work going on at all. It's vacant land, so would it be too much to ask the developer to get them both done at the same time?
I'd say that's unfair to do that.
Why is that?
They have the property and they have approval to go do the site work. Yeah, they have public legal access right here. So to say that, yeah, you can't build here unless you build that, well, they really don't even need this. They don't have to do that, but they want to do that. So I think it would be unfair. I understand the reasoning. I totally understand the reasoning, but I think that would be undue hardship.
I hope he doesn't need a lot of tractor trailers because the road getting up to the Bob Davis is pretty
Oh, yeah,
circuitous.
yeah. That's the other reason why they really want this. I mean, that's the way they need to come in.
Todd, is there any safety issues presented by eliminating the grass strip as you cross the bridge? I mean, if you have a sidewalk right next to a road and
Well, I mean, it's always safer to have it further back.
is there anything that could be done? I mean, would there be any type of railing or anything that could physically separate the sidewalk from the road on that bridge that could improve the safety?
Well, there's curbing that will go,
Right.
curb and gutter, so that helps some. I would also say that every time I've been out in this neighborhood, when I say neighborhood, this commercial complex, I've never seen anybody walking. You know,
But would the gutter be between the road and the sidewalk, or between the sidewalk, or then it would be the road, the sidewalk, and then the curb?
so here's the curbing right here. Actually, this would be better to do on this side. So here's the gutter and the curbing, and we would bring the sidewalk right down to the back of the curb. So you have a 6-inch curb there that helps protect, vehicles from riding up over it. They still can, cars going fast enough for a truck, but I guess to answer your question, yeah, a railing could be put there. Railings are really expensive, and what's the cost benefit of that? If
It's just more for an aesthetic purpose, isn't it? The grass strip?
Well, I mean, it is there for safety reasons. But again, how many people are actually going to be walking on this, if you think about it? This is the end of a cul-de-sac in an industrial complex and through the rest of the neighborhood. And I've done different developments out there. I'll be honest, I've seen 0 people walking out there.
What would you estimate the distance of the bridge where the grass strip will be reduced or absent? What do you think the distance would be?
40, 50 feet.
Including the taper.
Now, the taper would be beyond that. So it might be, let's say we need 50 feet to cross, maybe it's only 40 feet, but just say 50. It's probably going to be at least another 75 feet to get to the full section again.
Those are county residents.
I mean, we could come across and then take the sidewalks and quickly go back out, and Public Works can speak to this. Typically, they don't like us to do that. They like to have it at a taper and angle. We could sharpen up that angle a little bit to get there quicker.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are there other questions of the applicant at this time?
And if I understood correctly, staff is recommending this amendment or this change in request.
That's correct.
Not the variance.
We've discussed, myself and Mr. Perry with engineering have discussed this with the applicant, and we're okay with it.
Okay. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak at the public hearing?
So the variances, they do recommend.
Okay, then we're going to close the public hearing, and we'll open it for discussion amongst commissioners, additional questions, or a motion.
You recommend it with the, subject to the TDEC approval, correct?
Yeah, I may have been lost in my presentation at the time I wrote the report and at the time that I did the slides. Actually today, the variance request, it says here, grant approval of the preliminary plat without granting approval of the variance request. That was the variance request to eliminate the sidewalk.
Okay.
So we're fine with the amended sidewalk. The other piece about the TDEC approval and the staff report, we wanted, since there was an issue with those original variance requests that hinged on disturbance of the creek, we wanted verification from TDEC, and they said that they could.
You said it, I didn't listen.
Okay.
Okay, so is there any variance request necessary for the elimination of the grass strip?
Any change to this cross-section would require a variance.
Okay.
Granted, yes.
And Mr. Ryder, the little stubbed road and access from Bob Davis, that's not an issue in this request at all tonight.
No.
Could be in the future.
Yeah, that's true.
And so it would come back at that point in time in the future, and you would do neighborhood meetings and all that kind of thing?
Want
Not
to make sure
necessary.
I understand your question.
The access from Bob Davis Road, right now, we're not dealing with that.
That's correct.
That's not a part of this request.
That's correct.
If that's
Does it
something in
come
the
before
future,
us?
yeah. If it comes back in the future, would it come before us?
Can I just add one comment that staff does support the note that was put on there, that it is a temporary driveway, that it is not intended to be permanent.
I'm sorry.
The extension.
The extension is a
temporary.
part of this.
Let me back up just
Okay.
one to a previous site plan review. This was all one lot. They have access. They have access. There's nothing that we could do about them accessing their property through Bob Davis.
Okay.
So the original thing that we received from this applicant was to build a facility down here in this portion of the property, but it was still on one lot, did not need to come to, it was zoned appropriately, it didn't need to come to the planning commission or anything. So they said, hey, we're going to have a little temporary road here because we have frontage anyways. We're gonna have a temporary road here. We're gonna have to come through here to start building. In the meantime, we're going to build this road, come back to the planning commission at some point for a 4-lot subdivision so they can build other facilities possibly or sell off the lots. So there are really two things going on. Build the temporary, one lot, did a site plan approval for them to build on the lot, which they can do. They have access here. This is a temporary road. Nothing we could really do about that, but their intent is to get rid of the temporary road. They can't build it to public street standards anyways, as explained by Mr. Wood. So once they build this extension of Business Way, all lots will get frontage off of this cul-de-sac. There should be no need to have that temporary
That-
road or ever come back here again.
That clears
for
it
that.
up for me, thank you.
Okay.
Are there other questions? Other discussion? Then I'm looking for a motion.
I move we approve the preliminary plat for Vintec property as presented with a variance to allow the reduction to no grass strip while it passes over the bridge.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Dagenhart, a second by Commissioner Brock, to approve the preliminary plat with a variance to allow for the elimination of the grass strip as it crosses the bridge. Is there any other discussion? All right, call the roll, please, Nicole.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Brock,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Commissioner Rhodey,
Abstain.
Vice Chairman Cooper
Yes.
and Chairwoman Wild.
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right. Moving on to the next item of new business, this is the Evelyn C. Woody Heirs subdivision, final plat in Washington County.
All right, this is as you just mentioned, it's a Washington County plat. It's not inside the city limits. It's a 9-lot subdivision intended for future single-family development. The county zoning is A1 general agriculture. City water will be provided no later than November 1st, 2021. City sewer is not available. The TDEC stamp that we were waiting for is mentioned in your packet. It's been approved by TDEC, so the stamps are now on the plat. Lots meet site distance requirements as approved by, as verified by the engineering department. This is a 2-sheet plat. Actually, it's a 4-sheet plat. I've included 2 sheets of it in this presentation. The last 2 just have the site distance measurements on it. This is actually sheet 2 for lot 7, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Did it out of order intentionally because the other 4 lots, 2A, 2B, 2D, and 2E, are all before you for a variance request. The lot length of the length of lot and width ratio. Lot 1A and Lot 3 were part of previous replats, so those aren't under consideration tonight. So going back up again to this one, we have these 4 lots that front onto Carroll Creek that are actually double front lots between Carroll Creek and Knob Creek. And then lots 2A, 2B, 2D, 2E, and 2C on this sheet. Now, the lots meet all the requirements of the Washington County Zoning Code and the city subdivision regulations, with the exception of these lots on this particular sheet. They do not meet the length of lot width ratio, as I just mentioned, by slight margins. 2A by 3 feet, 2B by 13 feet, 2D by 8 feet, and 2E by 16 feet. Here's the location map with the areas that we're looking at for the subdivision for this plat. The purpose of the 3-to-1 lot length to width ratio is really to avoid long, narrow lots in order to promote the construction of streets to increase, particularly in the city, to increase accessibility, particularly for lots in the city, and to minimize the waste of land. We recommend approval of the plat with the granting of the variance for these particular reasons. This is outside of the city limits. This is not part of a major subdivision development like you would see out at the cottages or the villas at Beechwood or something along those lines. There's no need for the construction of new streets to promote accessibility between lots. And staff recommends approval of the variance request and the final plat.
Questions of staff at this time? All right, then let's go ahead and open up the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this topic?
My name's Steve Lyons. I'm a surveyor. I represent my clients, the Woody Heirs. This property is in Washington
I'm sorry, Steve,
County.
can you give us your address,
Oh,
just for the record?
1506 Old Boones Creek Road, Jonesboro.
Thank you.
The property is in Washington County. The streets, Knob Creek, Carroll Creek, are both county roads. They're not city roads. We've complied with all the regulations the city wants on the plat, except for the lot length, and we're over those 4% on some of them. That's about it. That's all we're asking for is the variance on the 3-to-1 ratio.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this matter? No, then we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing, open it up for discussion amongst commissioners. I have have just a simple question. Looking at Lot 2C, and I don't see the final, is its boundary beyond 2AB, D, and E, or why is 2C so skinny there? Because, it goes to that very large one. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I was looking at the second page of our packet, and I didn't see it in its entirety. Thank you.
Staff, I'd like to ask a question. Is there a functional or tactical reason why these variances are needed?
Because it's a deviation from the subdivision regulations. The subdivision regulation says you can't exceed the 3-to-1,
But is
length
there a
to width
reason why
ratio.
they can't? Or is there a functional reason why it needs the variance? Not, it needs the variance because it's different, but why is the variance needed?
Why is the variance needed? Well, they need as much land as possible to be able to go for the soil samples when they go to T-deck to get a good soil
Okay,
sample.
okay, it's a
for
soil.
perk. And,
Well, it would landlock 2C if they didn't have the variance.
Well, it's a lot depth question, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is, but if they had to meet the, if we required them to meet the width, then they wouldn't, you wouldn't have, it's not an easement, but you wouldn't have access to.
It's
lot.
not the width, it's the length, right?
I'm sorry, it's
You-
three, the
yes,
length,
you
the
could-
length.
the
can't
length.
Well,
exceed
no,
3
you still
times
wouldn't
the
have
width.
access. The only way to get access to 2C is either do what they've done or come up, use Lot 3's access.
Is it the length?
It's 3 times, it's the length can't exceed 3 times the width. So
But
is
they
it
would have to
possible
make
that
the
they could
lots
take
D.
these lot lines, these rear lot lines, and shrink the lot a little bit?
Yeah.
Possibly. Does it make any difference? No.
Yeah, I don't mean that to be
No,
critical, I was just
it-
asking the
it really
question.
just, I look at it really in a case like this, it's really the intent of the ratio isn't violated here. But yes, I suppose that they could reduce those lots. It's not what the property owner is
Not what the property owner
asking
wants to
for,
do.
but
I understand.
no, you have a great question. It's a great question. They would like to create the lots this size. When they went to T-deck, they wanted to increase their, I mean, honestly, they wanted to increase their chances to get a good soil sample so they could construct.
Okay, that's a very reasonable explanation why the variance is needed.
But, and it really, and looking at it, we had this discussion with Mr. Lyons. I said, somebody on the planning commission is going to ask why you have to have this variance and why you can't create the lot to
That
this
was me.
size. That was
Straight
you.
man, Chris.
So these were,
Which really put me off on a crash course of trying to really understand the intent of why that ratio is there. And I actually reached out to 2 previous development coordinators, and Mr. Vennard and Mr. Nielsen, really designed around the idea of development within the city and that sort of thing. And so, that's really,
so they will be putting in septic systems.
They will
They
be
won't be
putting-
connecting, do
That's-
we have sewer available out there?
we do not have sewer available, we have water available, but they've received their, up here in the upper left-hand corner, they've received their stamp from T-deck, that the soil perks
Thank you.
Thank you.
for 3-bedroom houses, which is another reason why they wanted to increase the lot size. Sometimes it's good to wear a mask.
A motion?
I am ready for a motion.
Who's gonna do it? I'll move for approval of this variance.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Brock, a second by Commissioner Cooper.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry,
no.
oh, Degenhardt.
Question asker here.
Oh, okay. Apologies. Is there any additional discussion? All right, please call the question.
Commissioner Aldridge?
Yes.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Commissioner Rhodey?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Cooper?
Yes.
And Chairwoman Wild?
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right. All right, the last item we have on our agenda of new business is the bond release for the village at Beechwood Meadows, Phase 1, Section 3. Thank you, Mr. Lyons.
All right, at the December 8th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting, you all approved a request to reduce a $72,000 irrevocable letter of credit with a $39,000 cash bond, with these outstanding items covered by that bond: Public Works as-built plans, multi-purpose trail, roadway repair, and a handicap ramp. To make a long story short, we received verification from engineering from Mr. Perry, who's sitting here in the audience tonight, that all the work that was deferred by the bond is complete, and the engineering division can recommend approval to release the bond. So staff's recommending approval or release of the $39,000 cash bond.
Are there any questions of staff? Okay.
I'll make a motion that we go ahead and release that bond.
We have a motion on the table and a second. Is there any additional discussion? Was there a need for a public hearing on a bond? I don't think so. Okay. All right. Other discussion? Call the question.
Okay. Commissioner Aldridge?
Yes.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Commissioner Rhodey?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Cooper?
Yes.
Chairwoman Wild?
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right. Last item I want to just discuss before we end, and I'm not going to keep anybody long, was we did meet last week. We had called a committee meeting to discuss the long-range and strategic planning subcommittee. We had a workshop. There were 5 of us in attendance. I did send a summary of the major things that we discussed at that meeting. I'd like to have a follow-up one, which we had originally scheduled for this evening, but we had at least 4 commissioners who were unable to attend. So I want to just schedule a follow-up, and I would like to potentially look at some dates and times and see if we could find availability. I had proposed that we do it on the first Wednesday of next month, which was our regularly set aside time for commission meetings, but I did speak to Commissioner Whitfield, and he is not available then, I can tell you now. Some other potential dates would be Wednesday, April 28th. April, this month. Or we could do it Monday, May 3rd, or Wednesday, May 12th. Those are just 3 that I know his particular availability. I don't want to plan everything around him, but there were just some dates that he threw out at me. But I am open to suggestions.
I could not do it on the 3rd or the 12th.
Okay,
But I
3rd and,
could do it on the 28th.
okay. Anybody, let me look on my calendar for the 28th.
I can't do the 28th.
You can't do the 28th, okay?
I can do the 28th.
28th, I can.
28th, so, sounds like Jamie's not available on the 28th.
That's fine. I mean, if you have the majority, that's fine. Nicole can tell you how good I am at reading emails. I'll just follow up.
Okay, if we go for the 28th, our regularly scheduled time is early in the day. Would we want to push that back? What would be the best time for people?
You said back, you talking about later?
Later in the day, yeah.
I already have another board meeting starting at 3:30, and it doesn't get over till 5.
Till 5. Do y'all want to shoot for a 6 o'clock meeting on Wednesday, the 28th? Does that seem to be a okay time for everybody?
An hour?
Yeah, let's do 1 hour. So Wednesday, April 28th, from 6 to 7 p.m.
And this is the legislative.
This
and
is
long-
the legislative and
Long range.
not long range,
Long-
land use.
Yes.
Legislative and land use subcommittee meeting. I think we'll probably have some overlap from our previous meeting, because we discussed how there was going to be a lot of synergy between the 2 subcommittees. But it'll give us a chance to hash out the real roles of each of these subcommittees, and then people can have an opportunity to express interest serving on one or the other, if that's their preference, and we'll make subcommittee assignments afterwards.
Are we meeting in the administrative conference room?
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
in the administrative conference room.
Nicole, will you send out a meeting notice?
Yes.
Please.
Tomorrow I will do that.
Yeah, and if you would do it like Jamie suggested, make it an actual invitation where people reply, yes, no,
Okay.
or maybe, and then that way we don't have to ask
Is there
again.
any other
Accept or
materials that
decline.
Sure.
we don't have already? If they could send it on out since I
Hit one of the
missed it
others.
before.
Nicole, could you potentially attach, did you get a picture of Preston's drawing?
Yes, and I did notes as well, with your notes and my notes and the drawings and everything, and I attached them to iCompass today. I just ran out of time to get them to everyone.
Okay.
But it's
Um,
on iCompass?
It
Okay,
is,
okay.
yes, ma'am, but I can
I'll
send
just
them
go
out
there, that's all right.
again. I thought I had sent them out through notification through iCompass, but I may not, so I'll double check that.
Okay.
Is there a way to attach a link to iCompass?
To,
Like, for instance, like when you add that note,
sure, mhm,
is there a link that's created that you could attach to the invite so that
okay,
you're not having to recreate going into iCompass?
I can do that.
I just need it simple, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. It's no trouble.
You're the best.
No, it's no trouble.
Okay.
I mean, Timber says a lot of bad things about you, but I don't.
I know, I know.
Nicole knows better, you know better.
Okay. Are there any other agenda items? No, Preston, you're not, no, go ahead.
Move we adjourn.
I'm sorry, Preston's
Preston's
gonna
not gonna-
overrule
Oh,
you.
Oh,
I
No,
tried.
I've just simply got a question. It's really a point of order. Nicole and I were chatting after the vote on the Business Way subdivision. Mr. Rhodey, you abstained. Was it a recusal or an abstention?
Abstention.
Okay.
Vintec is a client of our firm.
Okay,
Ah, okay.
Gotcha.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All right. We have a motion to adjourn, a second. Is there anybody opposed?
third and fourth, let's go.
that's right.
All right.
Welcome to your first meeting.
Thank